All right, so after reviewing your podcast check, I think that I needed to spend some time reviewing these cell comparisons. Um, and in all honesty, I was a little shocked that so many of you really struggled on the Venn diagrams comparing prokaryotes, eukaryotes, plants, and animals. Um, I think some of you did not read the labels because we did a warm up comparing fungi, plants, and animals, and then you answer the Venn diagram as if you were comparing those same three types of cells, when in actuality you were comparing plants, animals, and bacteria. Um, I think you need to be more careful on reading that information, and there's also evident that for many of you who did understand that still were lacking some deeper understanding. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. So you need to be able to compare prokaryotes and eukaryotes and plants and animals in regards to their types of cells, and what you can find inside of each of those cells. So what I did was copy down the Venn diagram as best as I could. I know these aren't perfect circles. I apologize about that. But here we have our Venn diagrams with our bacteria, plants, and animals. And so I guess I should point out that you should know this, and this is an extra piece of information I hoped that you would be able to put together. And I told you in the previous podcast that bacteria is a type of prokaryote. So when I'm asking you to do this, I'm asking you to compare plants and animals, which are both eukaryotic, to the bacteria, which is prokaryotic. So many of you wrote eukaryote right here in the middle. It's obviously very wrong. So this is where the eukaryotes are. Plants and animals are both eukaryotes. By the way, what we don't have on the Venn diagram here are the fungi and the protists, which are also eukaryotic cells, which mean, we'll just add a note here, that it has a nucleus and it has membrane-bound organelles, which include things like mitochondria, the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi bodies. They contain vacuoles, vesicles. Yep, and so it's a long list of things. Whereas the plants, I think most of you got this if you had watched the podcast in preparation. Chloroplasts, a large central vacuole, and a cell wall made of cellulose. Now, you might remember that I said that some bacteria have cell walls, but these cell walls are made, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but made of something other than cellulose. And this is something we talked about in class before the podcast check. So, bacteria are made of something other than cellulose. So, things that they all have in common. They all have DNA, which you now know from the modern cell theory. They don't all have a nucleus, but they all have DNA. They all have ribosomes, because DNA doesn't do anything without ribosomes. And this is exactly what viruses are not considered to be like, because they don't have ribosomes. They have cytoplasm and a cell membrane. Okay? So that's what they all have in common. The bacteria are smaller in size. So the bacteria are less than 10 micrometers and just a extra piece of information. They're all single cell to unicellular, whereas plants and animals are all, by definition, multicellular. And that is something that you should know because we talk about that in classification, and you're expected to remember that. Animal cells have lysosomes and a cytoskeleton. And to foreshadow, there's another thing that they have that plant cells don't, and they're called centrioles. We'll talk about that when we talk about mitosis. And one thing that I pointed out, I told you, is that bacteria have flagellum and cilia, but so do some animal cells. So maybe that's what we can put here. There's a flagellum. Some animal cells do, and some bacteria do. Flagellum and cilia. Okay? So this is something that you really need to understand, because if I give you a question to be able to compare these things, or if I give you a scenario of I found a cell with these things in it, you need to be able to tell me what kind of cell it is. And I guess just to add one more note here, that plants and animals are 10 to 100 micrometers in size. So again, I'm a little disappointed that I have to review this. I was hoping that you'd be able to put the pieces together pretty easily. So I'm not sure if it's that you're not really thinking about the material, or not preparing for class. But something needs to change, and I hope that this gives you a little bit of a drive and understanding to figure out what's going on. Okay?